Hey guys, today I'm doing a quick unboxing of the Zeiss Batis 85mm 1.8, and I'm going to be comparing it to the Sony GMaster 85 1.4. So interestingly, the box for the Zeiss Batis is actually bigger than the Sony GMaster. So let me take a look inside. Here I have the GMaster, okay, for comparison. And this is a brand new Batis, unopened. This is on loan to me from a good friend of mine. Okay, so let's take a look inside. We've got lens hood, instructions, a warranty card, a bunch of stuff that's written in German and I don't understand. Interestingly, no lens cover, which is not a big deal for me because I don't really use it. But the GMaster does come with the lens cover. Okay. All right, here we go. So let's put these side by side and compare size. Okay, so yes, so the GMaster is, it's a little bit bigger. I don't know that it's substantially bigger. It's definitely, the GMaster definitely weighs more than the Zeiss. The Zeiss has a neat form factor. It looks very compact, but when I'm holding it up close here to me, there's, honestly, the GMaster is not substantially larger. I think just because the Zeiss has some kind of neat curvature and it makes it look very sleek. The focus ring is flush to the body as opposed to the ribbed focus ring on the GMaster, and then the additional aperture ring on the GMaster just adds a little bit of, I guess visually it adds a little bit more thickness to the lens. So, okay, so here's the lens hood. I'm just going to go ahead and add the lens hood on the Batis and the GMaster just so that you can see what it looks like side by side. Okay. All right. So I'm going to quickly go through some specs for the two just as a comparison. I don't want to get too technical in this video, but first of all, let's talk about price. So the Zeiss Batis comes in at $1,200. The GMaster comes in at a whopping $1,800. So a pretty substantial price jump. So let's talk about availability next. The Zeiss Batis has not been very available. It's pretty much on back order as of today. I checked the internet at Adorama and B&H and Amazon. The Batis was actually not available. The GMaster, on the other hand, availability has been somewhat intermittent, but it's definitely been easier to get a hold of. I checked today. The GMaster was available on all those three sites. Next, let's talk about aperture. So the Batis is a f1.8 versus the GMaster, which is a 1.4, and so it's a huge selling point for the Sony. The aperture range for the Batis ranges from 1.8 up to f22 versus the Sony, which is f1.4 to f16. Both of these are autofocus lenses, and both of them share a minimum focus distance of 2.6 feet, or roughly 80 centimeters. Both of these lenses are weather sealed, so let's take a look. So the Zeiss has this blue seal here, and With the Sony, it's looks like it's just a black seal. You can't really see it, but you can actually feel it. Next, let's talk about the filter thread. The Batis, I think, to its advantage, only requires a 67 millimeter filter thread, so it'll be a lot cheaper to buy those filters as compared to the Sony, which is a 77 millimeter. All right, so when it comes to weight, again, the GMaster is definitely heavier. It comes in at 1.8 pounds or 820 grams versus just the Batis comes in at just a hair over 1 pound or 475 grams. Both have 11 elements in 8 groups, and from an aperture design standpoint, the Zeiss Batis has 9 aperture blades versus Sony's 11 circular aperture blades. And let's see if we can take a quick look at it inside here. Hopefully you can see that. Now, because the Zeiss does not have an aperture ring, I can't actually open it up for you to see. But you can see here in the Sony as I open it up. And you can see the aperture blade is circular. The 11 blade aperture and circular design is what actually gives Sony that perfect bokeh. So just a few more physical attributes to compare here. With the Zeiss, you have this OLED screen, and you won't be able to see it until I actually put it on the camera and turn on the lens. You'll see some information that pops up here. I'm not sure how useful that is for me. It looks kind of cool, but I'm not sure if I would be using it. The other thing about the Zeiss design here is this smooth focus ring. It's smooth, it's grippy. It's flush to the body here, so it does give it a nice sleek feel. It'll be interesting to see once I actually start shooting with it how well the focus ring controls the focus. The other thing about the Zeiss design is that it has image stabilization built right in to the lens, which for folks that are using the A6000 or A6300, you should be able to use this lens and get stabilized shots without an issue. As compared to the GMaster, which does not have image stabilization built in, you want to use these with the image stabilization bodies, the A7 II, A7 R2, and A7 S2, to really take advantage of this lens. So a few features on the GMaster that are unique and different from the Zeiss Batis design is that it comes with this aperture ring, and this is a huge selling point for a lot of photographers who kind of like to have that ability to change aperture right on the lens. You can set it to automatic and change the aperture right from the camera body, or you can use it manually here. There is a aperture ring declicking switch here, so you can actually turn it off, which then allows the aperture to be to move silently. So this, I guess, for videographers is a nice feature. But if you leave it on, then you have that nice feel, and you can count the clicks. So basically 3 clicks is one stop. So the other feature of the GMaster that's not available on the Zeiss design is a focus hold button. So you can use it as a focus hold, or you can go into Sony's menu system and assign it a function so it can be customized. And then lastly, you have the autofocus, manual focus switch, so you can switch back and forth right on the lens. So those are the basic differences between the two lenses. Now obviously you're going to want to know how well do these actually perform from a sharpness standpoint, a bokeh, distortion, chromatic aberration. I'm not going to be doing all those tests. I don't plan on doing all those tests. I will be playing around with the two lenses just to compare the bokeh. And I think that many will probably say that the GMaster is the bokeh king, and it's already got the Zeiss Batis beat. But you know, I own the GMaster. I love the bokeh. I've seen images of the bokeh from the Batis compared side by side to the GMaster, and you know, from those images, I pretty much reached my conclusion before I even bought the GMaster that this is the one I want because I like the bokeh. However, it comes in at a steep price difference, and so I actually wanted to see whether or not, you know, if I control some of the variables that contribute to the bokeh, whether or not under certain conditions the Zeiss bokeh would stand up against the GMaster. And so, you know, I think when we're talking about variables that affect bokeh, the obvious one is aperture. The GMaster being able to open to a wide 1.4 versus the GMaster 1.8. You know, obviously that's a huge advantage to the GMaster, but in some of my tests, what I'll do is I'll make sure that I'm comparing apples to apples. So the other things that contribute to bokeh, I had not read or seen much of anything on the internet about is the impact that distance plays into the bokeh. So there are three distance variables that we can apply to affect bokeh. First being the distance between the subject and the background, and then the second being the distance between the camera and the subject, and then finally the overall distance between the camera and the background. So I've come up with a test to compare the two lenses and altering those variables just to see whether or not the Zeiss has some sort of a sweet spot where it can actually hold up against the Sony GMaster as it relates to bokeh. So the other test I may try to do in a future video would be a sharpness comparison between the two lenses. Now I don't have the Zeiss Batis on loan for very long here, so I'm going to do my best to do as much shooting as I can with it and give you guys some sample images to compare with the GMaster. So I'll be back with some samples of the bokeh tests. Generally speaking, when the camera is closest to the subject and the background is far away from the subject, you'll get the best bokeh. Moving closer into the background, the bokeh will not be as smooth. And the bokeh is the weakest when the subject is near the background while the camera is farther away. Here you can see that only when the camera is stopped down does the Batis match the GMaster in bokeh. Okay, so I put both lenses to the bokeh test, and you can take a look at the pictures and decide for yourself. But for me, the clear winner is the GMaster. That said, the test was designed to really test the bokeh, and therefore the bokeh was the subject of those photos. In a real-world situation where these 85 millimeters are really I would say most of folks looking to buy these 85 millimeters would be using it for portraiture, and the real subject of those photos will be your a real person. And so the bokeh, I think the key is that as long as the bokeh is not distracting, is smooth, I think that you're going to be very happy with either of these lenses. They're both professional, competent lenses. So a few things that I noticed after shooting both of these lenses side by side. The first thing is the focus noise. The Zeiss Batis is basically noise free. Could not hear a single thing. And as many of you know from my prior video and from other owners of the GMaster, that there is a little bit of a focus motor noise. It's wasn't that noticeable to me prior to shooting the Batis. It was very obvious, when I was shooting with them side by side. Again, not a deal breaker, and not something that should scare still shooters away from the 85. And actually, as I think about, from a video perspective, I'm not a videographer, but I'm not sure that I would reach for the 85 millimeter as my go-to video lens anyway. So noise is overall not an issue, but definitely very pleasant that the Batis had no noise at all. The other thing I noticed with the Batis that was a little annoying was the indicator to line up the lens to the body of the camera is blue. And so you saw that I was shooting in pretty dark conditions. I was fumbling trying to attach the lens, and I really ended up having to go by feel, and it wasn't until I actually got inside that I could see, there's the E mount here as a reference point. But when I was out there in the dark, the Sony was a little bit easier to mount. So, and the other thing that you might have noticed from the photos is that I shot the GMaster at 1.7. There is not a 1.8 on this lens. I'm not sure why that is the case. It's some engineering and science that is way above my head, and so I shot at 1.7 as close as I can get to 1.8. But you can see again clearly the bokeh on the Sony was perfect. The lights in the background were perfectly round. I was actually very hopeful, and maybe just my hypothesis was way off to even think that the Zeiss would be able to stand up against the GMaster in a bokeh test if I had changed some of the distance variables. So in any case, I hope you found this helpful. Please hit me up on the comments with any questions. I try and answer them as best as I can, as quickly as I can. And if I missed something or incorrectly stated anything in my video, please feel free to correct me. I think that other viewers will find that useful. So I'll leave you with a final thought on these lenses. I think that if you're in the market for these lenses, or if you already own one of these lenses, I don't think that you can really go wrong. These are both, again, very professional, competent lenses. Each of them have their pluses and minuses, and you have to ask yourself whether or not you need the additional features that come with the GMaster. Is the smaller form factor of the Batis more important to you? Both of these lenses are just absolutely fantastic lenses, and I can't imagine you being disappointed. owning one of either of these lenses. So thanks again for joining me, and until next time, see you later.